Hi everyone, Bandana here, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the early access release of 9-Bit Armies from Petroglyph. Petroglyph are the team behind CNC Remastered, Star Wars Empire at War, various other strategy games, and some of the devs over there are obviously from the original CNC creators Westwood. Many thanks to them for the key so I could try out the game and do a review. If you want to see some of my pretty poor mission gameplay, you can check that out on the RTS Casts and Stuff channel. Now, I've never played 8-Bit Armies, the previous game in this line, or its offshoots, the 8-Bit Hordes or 8-Bit Invaders, so this was a totally new experience for me, bar the demo of 9-Bit Armies I played previously. It is designed as a very classic RTS and thus missing the vast majority of modern quality of life features we would expect from a modern game. Everything is done by hotkey, there are a few on-screen buttons to help give orders, think the original Command and Conquer. The initial early access release includes the Overlords campaign consisting of 12 missions that can be played solo or co-op, a versus mode that includes skirmish for up to 8 people, and a daily challenge mode to compete with other players for the highest score. It also has mod support for maps, missions and other modded content. Someone, for example, has already added game speed buttons to the UI because the game doesn't have any. There's also a roadmap for the game which I've put on screen now. It starts in phase 1 with balancing, a new Overlords campaign reinforced, whatever that means, replays, observer mode, and more challenges and more mod tools. Then in phase 2 there will be the Sentinels campaign, quality of life improvements and community requested features, but all of this is subject to change. So this is actually a re-record of my original review. I've had to adjust some bits because they released a patch just the day before I was going to post it, where they fixed some bits and pieces, and I'd like to mention that in there because some of it was issues I brought up. So normally in these reviews I do like a story section. I'm just going to briefly say that it's a very basic story. It's based on 2 factions, the Overlords and the Sentinels, with the addition of some alien invaders coming through in portals. But honestly, I found it a bit hard to follow. The story is told by a little person talking gibberish in the bottom left-hand corner of the missions, and you have to read the little text that is under them to understand what is actually going on. And while they're doing this at the start of a mission, the game is actually already being played and the mission is running in the background, so you're just wasting your time. And there's nothing sort of between the missions videos or anything like that that tell you any of the story, so story gets a thumbs down from me. Obviously a bit disappointing considering the pedigree of this studio. Okay, so what about the gameplay? Well, I guess this is where this game shines a bit more. It's very traditional RTS. So, in skirmish or versus mode, it's pretty much as you would expect. You start from a HQ building and a couple of units, expand your base, collect resources, build up an army. Units come as infantry, and then there are land, sea and air vehicles. If you are familiar with the old style base building RTS games, you should feel mostly at home here, aka CNC games, StarCraft, Warcraft, etc. Resources come from oil wells that do run out eventually, so it's possible to simply run out of resources on the map, unlike the CNC games where there was always a little bit being produced later. Sadly, the 2 factions have mostly similar buildings. The unit types do vary though, with some slightly different capabilities offered in each area. It leans heavily towards the original CNC here, I guess, where a chunk of the buildings were the same but the units differed. Both factions get access to some defensive buildings, and these, along with some of the other structures like power plants and radars, can be built in a square of 4 of these to make a mega version of the structure or defensive platforms. I would say my favourite there is the arc device, or the Tesla coil, because it is so strong and hits multiple enemies at once. The game also has a few super weapons, but honestly they're a bit less than super. The best one seems to be the orbital laser cannon that the Sentinels get. Some of you will remember this from CNC Generals. It can at least destroy buildings, and you can move it around as it fires, and it moves faster than a lot of units, so you know, you can kill someone's army with it as they try to run away. The Overlords get a nuclear missile, which is extremely disappointing. They don't do a lot of damage to buildings. If you have multiple, they drop in a predefined pattern, so you can't even land multiple on one building to destroy it. Other than that, you get a paradrop cannon for the Overlords that can paradrop units anywhere on the map, and the Sentinels get a shrink ray. I'm not entirely sure why. I guess the shrink ray is because it's kind of cartoony and blocky and it's just something silly. I mean, the thing is, the super weapons have a fairly short cooldown timer, but honestly, I would sooner have a more powerful super weapon that has double the cooldown. And I'd honestly be happy being limited to just 1 nuke or 1 orbital cannon building, and then obviously you know, it makes it worthwhile being super. All of that said, with the timers and things, this game is very fast, like really, really fast. You need some serious micro skills to keep up at times, and without many quality of life features, I think a lot of people will struggle here. The team posted this meme the other day on Twitter, and it amused me because this is exactly what I was doing in the game. Because you are dealing with so many units at once, I was just doing select all, attack move. I mean, it's such an old-fashioned game. A lot of us are older now. We don't have the reflexes to micro like we did when we were younger, and yet I feel like it's aimed at my generation of gamers, and yet they also seem to want us to micro very fast. There's a mismatch there somewhere, Petroglyph, I will say that. I would just say the skirmish AI aren't bad. You can control how difficult they are, but also control the actual strategy they will use. Will they be air heavy, ground heavy, defensive, aggressive, etc., etc.? That said, fair warning, they spam a lot of stuff, and you will have to spam a lot of stuff to compensate against it. So that covers the basic outline and the gameplay. Moving on, the campaign is made up of 12 missions that can be played in co-op. You start with a small amount of tech, and you build that up over time as you go through the missions, pretty much like all RTS games. As previously noted, it has a story that's explained in rather a disappointing way, the little guy talking gibberish in the bottom left of the screen. Each mission has multiple goals to achieve, a bronze, silver and gold star equivalent. Some of these are very difficult to obtain, and the gold on hard seems impossible on some of the earlier missions till you go forward and unlock more tech, then come back to it. That said, in this patch they have released, they have gone through and adjusted some of the missions. Unfortunately, to play these without all of my upgrades, I would have to reset and play through them all again, and I can't afford to spend another entire day on this review. So what I'm saying next will be of my personal experience playing the Overlord's campaign. However, please note that some of it might have changed, but they haven't detailed exactly what they've changed in the missions. So the missions are fine. They start out reasonably easy. Some of them are harder in the middle than they were towards the end, and I think a few people have complained about that, as in they would like it to ramp up in difficulty rather than there be an easy mission, then a bunch of hard ones, and then the end ones get easier again. My problem with the missions is that in reality they are just all glorified skirmishes. Now don't get me wrong here, there's often an element of that in RTS games, but this is to the extreme. While the objectives differ slightly, the reality is every map is a skirmish map with AI trying to attack you, and certainly not a mix like you would get in the old C&C games, and very little if any scripting is done in the missions themselves, so you don't finish an objective in the mission, then get an updated objective, or a change of play, or something like that. I'm told that they explain this is due to time and financial constraints, but being totally honest, I would rather pay a few extra pounds for the game and have some kind of story told properly between the missions and some actual variety and more effort in the missions themselves than what is currently on offer. And that's not to say it's not a fun campaign to some extent, but the fun is more the fact that it's very challenging. So challenging, in fact, they've had to dumb down the easy and medium AI because people were struggling with it so much. The big challenge being the attempt to get gold on every single mission on hard. I played through on hard and it was very, very challenging, and that's before they've done some fixes to it. And again, you can see my very poor attempts at this over on my RTS Cast and Stuff channel. But in all honesty, if you're in it for the campaign and the story, you're better off getting yourself C&C Remastered. Okay, next is something I feel I need to touch on because it's more to inform people who won't be aware, and that is the issues with controls and the lack of quality of life. So this is a very classic RTS, and that may be your thing. You may already know exactly what I'm getting at here, but I feel I need to warn other people about the fact that this game isn't going to be for everyone. The game's control system is very poor, and even for this type of game, some of it is very, very poor. For example, loading and unloading transports is an exceptionally fiddly affair, and frustrating at times. I even tried using the hotkeys for these commands and had even more issues. Obviously my hope is they will see comments like this and they will fix it. They have, for example, already made an adjustment to transports that you now see if they have units inside them even when they're not selected. One of the other issues is, and this is a quality of life feature, they have no stances for the units. That means they can't be defensive or aggressive, etc, etc. and though they will move a little to engage ground targets that attack them, they will just ignore air targets and ship targets unless they are already in weapons range. So unless you are everywhere to babysit your units constantly, expect to lose forces to enemy gunships or heavy drones in particular. Literally, I had to focus fire each and every heavy drone I came across, as my units ignored them as a threat due to their massive range. They need a nerf. And this is where that massively heavy micro requirement comes in. Another thing was some units like battleships won't even fire their main cannons without a direct attack order. Even though you use attack move, that just does nothing. There are no on-screen buttons for any of these commands, so you have to learn the hotkeys. They have promised improved quality of life features in Phase 2 of Early Access, but they haven't said anything about what that entails. So if learning hotkeys is not your thing, right now this is definitely not the game for you. Now, I always like to do a little graphics and sound section. I mean, the sound is cutesy, it's fitting to the theme of the game, I guess. I don't really like the fact the advisor for the missions just talks gibberish, though. I'd rather they explained everything in English. Graphically, I really can't say a lot other than, well, I suppose it's fitting with the theme that they've gone for, but it's not going to break any new barriers for amazing graphics. And I also feel it's kind of a shame they went down the route of having identical buildings for the two factions, pretty much. In summary, 9-Bit Armies is a truly classic RTS, and it's not going to be for everyone. It lacks modern quality of life and has a heavy focus on micro and learning hotkeys, and it's unclear if or how much that will change. That's not to say it's not a fun game, because it is, and I've put 13 hours into struggling through the hard campaign and also doing a few skirmishes, though at times I have found it frustrating due to the lack of those modern quality of life features and the fact I'm not a super fast micro gamer anymore. I don't have the reflexes I used to, and again, I'm not quite sure who the target audience for this game is. With the amount of unit spam you're playing with, how can you expect people not to be doing select all attack move? The campaign is a fun challenge, but it is very, very basic. It's nice that it can be played co-op, however, compared to the likes of CNC Remastered Collection in terms of story and mission variety, it's lacking. It simply does not compete. I struggle to recommend it based on the campaign. Co-op as an option might be something that swings it for you, but there are other RTS games out there that have co-op campaigns. But if you're looking for a challenge, then you'll definitely find it here. Skirmish obviously has a lot of variety if that's your thing, with not just AI difficulty but also what it will focus on in terms of its combat strategy. So if you're a lover of that or playing it co-op, then that is definitely going to be good for you. And obviously you can play online versus, but I'll be honest with you, there aren't exactly millions of people playing the game. So where does that leave us? The game comes in at a price of $16.75 at the time of writing or recording. If that price is the price it stays on final release, then I think that's a fair price, but I would struggle to be convinced that it's worth more than that unless they do miracles with the additional campaign they add. And that's on the basis that for most RTS games, for me, a big part of it is the single player campaign. You know, that thing that Electronic Arts completely forgot about with their last couple of attempts at Command & Conquer, which then flopped and got cancelled before launch. As I said earlier, I'd rather pay a few pounds more, say 20 quid, to have a slightly better second campaign, or even this one refreshed with proper cutscenes and stuff between the missions to tell the story. Obviously that's a personal thing, some people will just be happy with skirmish and multiplayer. As ever, it's an early access game, so I'm never going to tell anyone to buy that. It has to be your decision. I honestly think it would benefit from having a demo with the first few missions and a limited skirmish permanently available so people can actually see how it plays and understand the control system. Has anyone else played the game? Or perhaps 8-Bit Armies? Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. As always, please do hit that like button and share and subscribe, and I will see you all soon.